Wow, end of March already. Thank you for joining me today and really throughout this entire month as we looked closer at some common cognitive distortions and really was in hope to expose these lies so that we can realign our lives with God's original, good, prosperous, blessed plan for us. Hey there. Are you a Christian woman who's ready to strengthen your faith and stop the madness in your mind? The worry, doubt, anxiety. Do you want something more for your life but are not sure where to even begin? You've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Kristin Campbell. I'm excited that you're here as we journey together to discover mindset renewal and empowered faith for the Christian woman. And my prayer is that throughout this time, and even into the coming months and years ahead, that the Lord would bring these sneaky distortions to your awareness. Not in any judgment. He's not mad. He knows and understands. And his desire is that you and I would be set free from the lies. Galatians 5:1 tells us it's for freedom that Christ set us free. And John 8:32 tells us the truth will set you free. So as we expose a couple more of these cognitive distortions today, let's stay focused on the Lord's truth more than the lies, on his redemption more than our deception. Let's allow truth to set us free. The final two distortions that I want to discuss today are the mental filter and disqualifying the positive. Now, these are the last two that we're going to cover, but they're certainly not the last two out there. There are so many more. I'd encourage you to continue to seek the Lord for awareness of others that may be in operation in your life. And again, if you're just catching this series, cognitive distortions are thoughts that are altered or twisted in some way that we believe to be true. And it's a deception the enemy uses to get us off God's original plan for our lives, to separate us from him. And as we become aware of these distortions and we break our agreements with them, we can rebuild truth into our thinking. And that's going to lead to our behaviors changing, and we really can change the trajectory of our life. The first step is the awareness, exposing the lies. Now, I'm going to review all the ones that we did cover throughout this month at the end, kind of like a Cliff Notes version, so stay tuned. But today, let's jump right in. Let's look at the mental filter cognitive distortion. So this thinking only looks at and pays attention to pieces of information, typically are negative, and it ignores any positive information. So it will filter out any information that does not support its negative point of view. And when you are only looking at the negative, when you are locked into that one perspective, ignoring any evidence of positives, you are going to develop inaccurate views and beliefs about yourself, about others, about the world around you, about God. So let's take a look at this. Did you have a bad day or a bad 5 minutes? Are you horrible at your job? Or did you forget to send one email? Is your partner the worst? Or did they simply make a mistake? This mental filter gives us tunnel vision to only negatives, and we become unable or unwilling to see the full picture of life around us. Yes, negatives happen. So do positives. So if you are recognizing that you're operating in this overly pessimistic view of the world, of yourself, of others, a great start to breaking free is with a gratitude list. Nothing fancy. Just recognize this filter is at work and begin to expand your perspective to intentionally find something positive, something to be grateful for. And it's important to put this into practice. It's not like a one and done. You want to grow this habit more and more in your life. And the reason for this is our brains have a tendency, which is called confirmation bias, to seek out information that reinforces what it believes. It tends to selectively interpret information naturally. So when all we are feeding it is negative, it's going to seek out more negative. By intentionally seeking out positive, it will follow suit. And it's going to seek out more confirmations of positives. Philippians 4:8-9 tells us to think on whatever is true, noble, lovely, praiseworthy, excellent, and to practice doing so. And I really know that the Lord knew what you feed is going to grow. The remaining cognitive distortion that we're going to talk about today is disqualifying the positive. It's similar, but here you do notice the positive, but you immediately reject it. You disqualify it as being anything worth focusing on, and you return your attention to a negative. Now, I did this a lot in just varying degrees without really being aware of what I was doing. So I want to see if any of these statements ring any bells. You get picked to head up a project at work, and you think, oh, it's no big deal. Anyone could do it. You put together a successful school fundraising event, but say, well, it doesn't count. It's only elementary school. Or in my case, I earned my bachelor's and I was on Dean's List 4 semesters in a row, but it doesn't count because it wasn't an Ivy League school. I'm not really smart. Wow. So often we disqualify ourselves, our achievements, the blessings God has gifted us because of deeper issues and unhealed areas in our hearts. And it's so important to recognize this disqualification pattern and bring it to the Lord so He can heal the hurt that's kind of lingering in the background. And often it has to do with our self-worth. Again, I'd encourage you to get support if this is you. A trusted friend, family member, church member, therapist, life coach. That's what we're here. We heal in community. So before we close, I want to review all the cognitive distortions that we covered this month and kind of some steps you can begin to take to break free so that you can align your thoughts with truth. Okay, and remember, it all begins with awareness, with bringing it to light. And now, even though this is the Cliff Notes version, I do encourage you to go back and listen to the full episodes. Okay, starting with emotional reasoning. I feel it, so it must be true. We discussed how feelings are not facts, that real does not equal true. Not always. They're not interchangeable. You can have real feelings with false assumptions. And as you recognize this distortion, you can begin to separate out your feelings. Look for evidence, concrete evidence, not circumstantial. You want to be able to solidly prove or disprove your assumptions, to break it down. Ask the Lord for clarity. Ask others, am I seeing this right? Because Jeremiah 17:9 tells us the heart is deceitful. So you don't want to rely on it. We talked about overgeneralization, taking one instance and creating a general thought pattern in your life, typically negative. And I gave the example of that pyramid scheme, right? Once the enemy gets us to buy into that distortion, that lie, it's going to create this limiting belief. And you will then unknowingly reinforce that in your life through the choices you make. Our thoughts drive our behavior. The enemy's just then going to step back and let you do that hard, dirty work. Psalm 139, verses 23 to 24 says, "Search me, O God, know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." It goes on to say, "Lead me in the way everlasting." Let the Lord look at those things and get truth in there. We talked about the all or nothing thinking, that black or white thinking, which lives in extremes, and you're unable or unwilling to see any shades of gray, any alternative interpretations of situations. And you're going to recognize this distortion by red flag words of always, never, either or, and then I included that should and must. Even though they can be their own category of cognitive distortions, this thinking being so extreme traps us. And we become very self-critical, and we can easily slip into feeling shame or failure or disappointment. So to be able to recognize when you're in this thinking and step out of it, surrendering your imposed expectations to the Lord, seeking His plan over your own, His point of view over your opinion. And then this starts to open your thoughts to different possibilities. Isaiah 55 tells us that, God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We talked about personalization, where you take everything personally and you blame yourself even when there is no logical reason to do so. Recognizing when you're in this trap that, you're not that powerful. There is but one God who is sovereign, and it's not you and it's not me. Whew, what a relief. Separating out what is our responsibility and what is not. Psalm 86:10 says, "You alone are God." We talked about mind reading, assuming that we know what another person is thinking, and that assumption is typically negative and often without any supporting evidence. The problem is that we then react according to our assumptions, which creates quite a mess very quickly. And the deeper question here that you want to talk to the Lord about is, well, what's causing me to jump to that conclusion in the first place? Is there an underlying limiting belief that is at play? 1 Corinthians 2:11 tells us only God knows the thoughts of man. We talked about what's closely related to that mind reading, which is fortune telling. This is where you believe that you know what is coming, and it's typically negative. Again, it has little or no supporting evidence. And the sneaky thing with this is fortune telling often activates a phenomenon known as self-fulfilling prophecy, which social psychologists first noticed, where our expectations will alter our behaviors in ways to make the expectations come true. It's our expectations influencing behavior. Now, the good news is that self-fulfilling prophecy works both negative and positive. Okay, so you can recognize when you're jumping to a negative conclusion, and you can reframe it according to truth, and you can start that motion to a more positive outcome. James 4:13-15 warns us that, we don't know what tomorrow brings. It's best just to say, if the Lord wills. And finally, we discussed today the mind filter, only seeing the negatives and ignoring the positives, filtering out the positives that you have around you. And, you need to retrain your brain to look for those things. A gratitude list is a great start. That confirmation bias, our minds gravitate to naturally seek out evidence to support our existing beliefs. So if I believe nothing good happens to me, I'm only going to see the bad. But if I believe I'm blessed and highly favored, I'll see God's blessings. Philippians 4:8 tells us to think about whatever is true, noble, excellent, praiseworthy. That's what we need to be focusing on. And lastly, disqualifying the positive. You see the positives, but will immediately reject them in favor of a negative. You disqualify these things. Again, this often is tied to a deeper limiting belief at work, probably self-worth. Taking this to the Lord for healing, beginning to celebrate the accomplishments, really just who you are, instead of just dismissing yourself. Psalm 139:14 tells us, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." So thank you again for joining me this week. I pray that this has been helpful to you. Please visit my website at www.thekristincampbell.com for more episodes, for resources. You can set up a free discovery session. Until next week, be blessed. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. I hope you walked away a little stronger in your faith and freer in your mind. You are so loved. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. Leave your ratings and reviews, and engage with me on social media. I'd love to hear from you.